an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Deadwood, Season 2, Episode 9, Amalgamation and Capital. In this episode, one guy whom I really, really wanted dead is indeed dead, and I'm very pleased. Another guy who is an adorable, sweet child who did not deserve anything like this is, I'm pretty sure, dead. And I am angry right now. I'm mad. Big mad. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Patrick for commissioning this episode, but not many thanks to Patrick for putting me through this because I'm mad at him now. Patrick, why would you do this to me? You know, I'm not somebody who is big on, as you all probably know, I'm not big on romance in stories unless it's done super well. And I'm not big on kids in stories unless the actor that portrays them is excellent or the writer that is writing them really knows how a kid sounds and is able to capture that. And this show has made me care about this little boy in a way that isn't exactly tied to him specifically. He represents something really important. And I will get to all of that later, but I have feelings. I have feelings, okay? And the episode starts off with him and a conversation between Bullock and him. And it's really tough because I feel like I don't know how I want to. It's the sort of thing. It's like I was about to say I would really like to like Martha, and then I sort of stopped myself and I'm like, would I like to like Martha? There are some people that I'm almost not even sure because I would have to hold a simultaneous liking of Martha and a liking of Alma. And as much as I know that that's a totally fine thing to do, in my gut, I feel like you have to pick one, and that's not really fair. I shouldn't have to pick one. But Martha is somebody that I deeply empathize with. And I feel for this woman, I really do. But I also don't like her yet. I'd like her better this episode for sure, because it feels like she's really making this huge effort to put the past in the past because she knows it's what's best for her son. And if the fact that she is willing to put the well-being of somebody else ahead of her own feelings about something speaks very highly of her as a person. So I respect her a lot, but there's just not a whole lot to her personality yet that I feel like I gel with, really. Like Alma, what I like about her is her complete unwillingness to take any shit. And as much as that can translate to her being snobbish and downright bitchy at times, I'll tolerate that. That's fine, because there are so few characters like her. Women in general, when we are written as, quote, strong, usually that strength is translated as being more masculine, because that's the sort of strength that we understand and respect as a culture, unfortunately. And that sort of strength often translates to, ironically, somebody more like Jane, who is, dressed more masculine and speaks in a way that is like almost unheard of amongst women, except for maybe Trixie. And somebody who gets scrappy and fights a lot, that sort of thing is what we will often see as like a strong character. And I like Alma because she is a strong character that has flaws, and those are really apparent, but they aren't, I don't think, enough to write off everything else wonderful about her. And there are so many male characters. I mean, Al Swearingen is a son of a bitch, but I'm sure people love him. And I'm sure those same people do not like Alma at all. And that's because a lot of strong women, when they aren't being strong in the way that we're used to seeing, and they also have flaws, are simply written off as bitches. We're not allowed to be flawed. Women characters get to be sidekicks, or we get to be romance. And that's about it. And this show is really doing something different with having Alma be as compelling as she is, and also very obviously flawed. And Martha is also a strong woman character, but she's also a different kind of strong. And this is what I love to see. She is strong in that she has a child to take care of. She lost a man that, from what her son says, what William says to Seth about his dad, it seems like she was in love with Seth's brother. Like, that seems like a real love that they had. And she has had to find a way to carry on and care for her son, make sure that, she will be provided for, and also deal with a move to some place that's completely unfamiliar, that is full of danger and awkwardness and threat and, any number of inconveniences just feels like too mild a word, just flat out discomfort, And she's doing this with barely a murmur, to be honest, until she runs into Alma and they have this confrontation last episode. And her anger and her flare-up is totally understandable. So as much as it pained me to see her reject Seth the way that she does at the end of the last episode, and as much as I'm just sort of like, this sucks, I wasn't even mad at her. I was just like, yeah, I'm sure that's really fucking insulting and humiliating. Damn, that blows. And then we see her this episode really being the bigger person and deciding to set this all aside because the camp is small. She knows she needs to get along with people. She knows that she needs to make things easier for her son, and him living in the house with her and Seth not talking to each other or looking at each other is not going to be good for anybody. And that is strength. That is being able to put your pride aside for the sake of the well-being of people you love and the community that you are going to be part of is super difficult. I mean, most people can't do that. And that's part of why our world is the way it is. And I just really enjoy getting to see that strength coming from a woman who is playing a really traditional role in terms of gender. She is a wife. She is a housekeeper or homemaker. That's the word I want. And we often sort of look down on characters that are, especially women characters that play this sort of role, because it seems simultaneously weak and sort of it's taken for granted just as much on television as it is in real life. So these sorts of characters are often sort of just discarded as background, or the wife will play the stone in the shoe of the guy who's trying to be the hero, and she's going to be the one who's always worried, or she's going to be the one who's always arguing, or she's going to be the one that wants him at home, and that whole thing. And we don't really have that at all with her. She seems to be very clear on the fact that Seth's job is going to cause him to be in danger. He is going to be called away at all hours. He is going to be unavailable a lot of the time. And she doesn't ever protest about that. And what she is here is her own person with her own goals and her own attachments. And because of that, I believe William is killed. It looks like he is completely out but at the end of this episode. That makes this all the more tragic because there are a couple factors here. One, he is why she has been willing to set things aside with Alma. Her son's well-being and his need to have a cohesive, functioning family is a big part of it. Her son is also why she married Seth, right? Like, I think if she had been married to Seth's brother and his brother died, but she did not have a child, she would simply have entered back into the marketplace as a widow. But she had a child to care for, and that completely changes the equation. So if the child is taken out of the picture, like, is there a reason for her to be with him? Now they're sort of stuck with each other, and they don't even have that common tie of blood from his side and hers to hold them together. And that is so fucking awful. I just like, and this child is all she had coming to this camp. You know, she had like a trunk of some things and she had a child, her tie to the husband that she loved. And now that's gone. And not only is that gone, but Alma is pregnant. Alma is pregnant with Seth's child. And poor Martha's child is dead. I don't see any way around that being horrible. I mean, there's no way to stop that kind of resentment. I don't care how good a person she is. I don't care how much she is willing to step back and take a look at the big picture and make a better decision because of that. There are some emotions that you can't get away from, and you just have to learn how to cope with them and deal with them. And that kind of resentment of losing your child while this fucking woman walks around pregnant with your husband's baby. Are you kidding me? Like, take a better woman than me to get over that shit. I don't think I could do it. So I just like, and the way that this all goes down too, like, it's such a total accident. And one could say for the show that it's sort of contrived. I don't know about Bullock's actual history because Seth Bullock was a real person. I have not looked at any of that up because I know that there are going to be spoilers in there. But life, like, is full of accidents. And the fact that this is such a sort of random thing is, to me, almost like more believable than if they had his death be the result of some like plot thread. It's like sort of indirectly a plot thread because the guy who pulls him down off the back of the bike is the dude that Seth got into it with when that dude was trying to tar the general earlier. And I feel like he got down William in order to make it a point to Seth that, like, I had access to your kid and you better watch your fucking step, basically. But I don't really consider that to be the cause of the accident, even though if he hadn't done that, this kid would not have been in his way, in the way of the horse, I should say. Despite that, if he had been on the back of the bike, Nuttall almost gets run down by this horse, and William could easily have fallen off the back of the bike and gotten, right? Like, so it could still have happened. It's less likely, but it's not like William's death is directly a result of somebody who was like enemies with Seth carrying out revenge or a threat or anything like that. It indirectly is. And I could see people having a problem with that, but I actually sort of like it because there is something so cartoonishly evil about hurting a child. And I know that, like, that whole beginning of the first season has to do with that, but that is not because the child is the target so much as that the child represents something else. This dude trying to hurt William would paint him as a very different kind of person. And I feel like the show tries as much as they can to avoid characters who are caricatures like that. Not to say that they don't exist. And there's something a little bit more like unpredictable about this that reflects how life can be. Because unfortunately, we want to act like we can see things coming and we just can't. Life is unpredictable. That's part of what makes life so scary. You know, it's just, you don't know. I think every day when Owen leaves the house about whether or not I may not see him again. Like, he could get in a car accident and he could suddenly have an aneurysm, like any sort of problem could crop up and you never know. And there's something like weirdly poetic about that here. So, and you know, like, again, I'm not positive that William is dead, and I will be upfront with you guys. When I searched this episode title, just to double check that I had it correct, the little result for Deadwood on Google has like a screen cap for each episode and the title underneath it. Even if you search for a specific title, it will give you like the titles of the 3 episodes before and 3 after what you searched for. And there's a picture for the next episode of Martha sitting next to a bed and William's laid on the bed. And for a second, I saw that picture and I was like, oh my God, I guess he survives. Because it looks like he's on a sick bed and she's like watching over him. And I was like mad for a second. I was like, I can't believe I just got spoiled that he's actually alive. And then I was suddenly like, I don't know that he's alive. They lay bodies out on beds. Like that could be his body that she's like, you know, sitting over and they're having a wake or something, you know, or he could be technically still alive and wind up dead because they just did not have a lot that they could do at that time, you know? But I just want to let you all know that I did see that image. And so it's sort of like coloring because I would have said unequivocally that he was dead before I saw that picture. And then I sort of took it back and then I took back the take back. But anyway, so I just wanted to talk about that at first because what's going on with Martha and Alma is really, in some ways it can be really frustrating when women characters are pitted against each other for a man and there's like a jealousy there or whatever, because it's such an easy thing to do. And it's so common. Like very recently, somebody that I very much like and trust and thought had my back accused me of getting into a conflict with another woman out of jealousy. And it was incredibly insulting because I was having a very valid issue with a person, and to have my feelings about this and my experience reduced to something that petty and small is just insulting. There's no way to get around what you're saying about a person when you insinuate that that's all there is to their conflict. And that's done to women a lot. Anytime that women have a problem with one another, we put things down to jealousy. And I'm not trying to say that that's not a factor sometimes, because of course it is. I mean, that's just human nature. But we don't do that with guys the same way. And it's because we see women as like striving for men's approval first and foremost out of everything that they could be striving for. And so jealousy is seen as this like huge issue for women because that is what our worth is tied to. And it's just really gross. And I am a big fan of the fact that this show started something off with a trite sort of like love triangle. And they're really making an effort to do something a little bit different and surprising with that and show how in this sort of community, you didn't have the option to just like be enemies and hate each other and stay on opposite sides of the camp. Like, I suppose some people could handle it that way, but it'd be really tiresome and it would take a lot more effort. And they're showing like how people had to learn to coexist and forgive and move on. And it's even a beautiful moment when she like puts it out there. Well, shouldn't Alma be at the opening of her own bank, considering that she's going to be like right here? And everybody thinks, it seems, that she's asking because she wants to start some shit and just basically have it out. And Alma also clearly thinks that. And when Ellsworth asks her, and she just is like grilling him about how Seth reacted, it's very clear that she's trying to feel out, if this woman puts me on the spot, is Seth going to have my back or not? And when she arrives and Martha holds her hand out and is like, I really would like us to have a better conversation than we did last time. And I really wish you luck with this whole thing and you offering opportunity to people in this camp. You can see so clearly how moved Alma is. This is the last thing that she expected. And there is a real respect coming off of her in this scene. She came ready for a fight, ready to be shamed maybe. And she has this woman extending an olive branch and congratulations of all things. Women have to have each other's backs and it can be hard. But I really enjoyed this scene and I enjoyed Alma's reaction of just total surprise, but also like there's a softness to it. There's like a vulnerability in her surprise of just being like, oh, wow, you're being better than I thought, better than I probably would be, So yeah, all of these scenes are just so good. And I will confess, I wanted so badly to find out whether or not she was going to take Ellsworth or not. If Alma was going to say yes to his proposal, and we do not get a response from her by the end of this episode. I'm not confident we're going to get a response from her by the end of next episode either. Considering everything that just went down, I could see her feeling upset enough and distracted enough to just be like, I'm not even thinking about that right now. On the other hand, I could see the way that Martha handled this as being what that extra push that Alma needed to make her decision. Because hear me out. Here's what I sort of think is going on here. And I say this as somebody who is deeply defiant. Like, all you need to do to get me to not do something is insist that's the right thing to do. You don't even have to, I'm not even going to say, do this. Like, if I will do something because you tell me not to. It doesn't even have to be that concrete. If you just really hint strongly that I should do something a certain way, or if I know that you have a sort of immovable opinion about something one way or the other, depending on who you are, I am going to feel this perverse desire to do the opposite because I just love to prove to people that they don't know everything. And it results in this weird kind of arrogance on my part, even though I'm sort of trying to disprove someone else's arrogance. Alma, I think, was low-key sitting on Ellsworth's proposal because she resents the fact that she needs a man to cover up her, quote, mistake. I think she resents society fucking-standably. And even though she appreciates what he is offering and knows in a lot of ways that this is the answer to her prayers and that this will, if not put to rest any rumors, because everybody knows perfectly well, at the very least will present a respectable face and make her life so much easier. And she knows all this, and she can even rely on the fact that she trusts Ellsworth with her money, which is a pretty big deal. A woman like this has to be extra careful in terms of the men that she decides she is going to bring into her life. I think that she just resents that fact. And it's not his fault. It's just the way things are. And I could see the way that Seth's wife reacted to her, making her even more like bristly about it and wanting to dig her heels in even more, just because she doesn't like this woman. She resents who this woman is with as well. And almost would like to humiliate his wife, even though it would result in her own humiliation also. I think that there was a little spark of that there. And I hope that Martha offering this olive branch will settle her mind a little bit and make her realize, like, okay, sometimes you need to do what's best for the person that you are going to be responsible for rather than yourself. And if that is the case, I will be so happy, because really in the end, I want her to accept Ellsworth so bad. I don't like ship the two of them. Not really, because there's not that kind of chemistry at all. But I do really like their alliance. And in something like this, that's more important, to be honest, than anything. Like, there comes a point where you have to be pragmatic. And in terms of everything that Ellsworth has already done for her and proven to her, I don't feel like she's going to find anybody other than Seth who would have her best interests at heart the way that he does. So fingers crossed, Alma. It's not just the thing to do for society. It is also the thing to do for you personally. Just be cool, girl. Just, so that pretty much covers all of that, because he pushes her a couple times to be like, so, and she's like, oh my God, I'm not ready to give you an answer, please. And he's just sort of like, okay. But yeah, it takes a little bit for her to make up her mind. And I just hope that next episode, I don't think we'll find out next episode, but we'll see. So I pretty much talked over a lot of that, but the scene where Seth is talking to William is really sweet too. Where he's just like straight up, I was 9 when my brother left home and you're 11. So like at this point, you knew him better than I did. And like, what was he like? What did he like to do? And Martha, coming down the stairs, overhears this conversation. And I think there's like a couple things happening there. One being the fact that Seth is like expressing curiosity and wanting to preserve the memory of the man that she loved softens her toward him and makes her respect him a little bit, because in a lot of ways, I'm sure she felt pressure to not talk about her late husband in front of him because of, I don't know, a weird sense of like respect, or you know what I mean though? It's sort of like, even though it was his brother, it was also the man that she was married to previously. It's like talking about your ex all the time in front of your current boyfriend or husband. So I could see that maybe she just felt like she had to completely bury her memories and feelings towards this man that she used to be in love with. And hearing Seth be willing to talk about him in this way is probably like an enormous relief. And he's engaging her son on something that is important to him, a person that was important to him. And I think that is also a big factor for her, that this man is willing to talk about somebody that he didn't know well, but whom he loved, but it probably brings him pain, in order to draw out my son, which means that he cares about my son's like well-being and isn't here to just feed and clothe us and give us some place to sleep. He gives a shit. And then there's also the fact that her son seems to be growing attached to Seth as well. He seems to like Seth, and her having a conflict with a man in his life, the father figure now in his life, isn't going to be great. And so she sees the way the wind's blowing and is just like, you know what? Okay. All right. Yeah. And later on, they have that moment where he's like planting sunflower seeds because they were his father's favorite flower. And a lot of the seeds got chewed, but he has a few left that he brought with him from where they used to live. And he's planting them to grow in memory of the man that they both loved. And it's an acknowledgement to her that her son is ready to move on with his life and have somebody else be the head of the family in his head, but that he hasn't forgotten his dad and he still cares and he's still going to hold his memory and be respectful of all of that. And it's hard for me to know exactly how long ago this all went. Like, I don't know if they said on the show and I missed it, but I don't remember in either case how long it's been since her husband died. But that sort of grief takes a really long time to get over. I always feel like if you lose somebody that close to you, you've got 3 rough years ahead of you, minimum. And I just feel for Martha, honestly. All right. So that scene I just really enjoyed. Then we have the scene where Al meets up with EB, and EB has had a toothache and was like completely out of commission. I don't think I mentioned that last episode, that he was like in the closet, which he calls his office, but it looks like a fucking broom cupboard in the hotel, with a toothache, and just practically bit what's his face's head off when he came in looking for him. But yeah, he missed the arrival of the Russian telegraph operator. And Al is basically like, I need you in place. So you need to get it together, go deal with this guy. And if he is sending anything to Yankton, I need you to keep a special eye on that. And EB has only just started to like get into this guy's, I don't even want to say good graces, because I hesitate to say that anybody is in EB's good graces, or that EB is in anybody's good graces. That's what I meant. But he at least is positioning himself where Al told him to be. And this is when Miss Isringhausen comes in. And it turns out, I expressed some concern last episode for the way that Alma sort of tipped her hand. And I was like, I wasn't sure if it was completely clear that she had been tipped off, or if it was just like, if Isringhausen could write it off to, well, I should be gone. She's getting suspicious. Like, it's just her putting 2 and 2 together. Apparently, Isringhausen assumes that she's been tipped off, which is correct. And she goes to send a telegraph to the rest of the Pinkertons, basically telling them that, like, Al acted like he was going to be cooperative, but it's pretty clear that he's double dealing and we should not be paying him that $50,000 because he's not planning to do anything good with this. And Al gets a letter from Alma letting him know, hey, so I'm sorry, but I kind of fucked up. Luckily, right in time. So he summons Miss Isringhausen to his office and is basically like, look, I am not interested in playing you guys. Not really. Like, because if she gets taken off and arrested, I am going to be watching somebody who doesn't know how to handle her claim take it over, then sell it off to fucking Hearst, more than likely. And the last huge section of this camp that is sort of like unowned by him at this point, he's going to have everything. And I cannot have that. So how's about I just give you $5,000 to walk away from this situation completely? And she wants, similar to him, a contract saying that she will be safe if she takes this money and leaves town. And she also wants Bullock to escort her out because she doesn't trust Al, and she fucking shouldn't. Smart of her. I don't believe she has quite signed it by the end of the episode. She's still reading it over when everything goes down with the horse escaping and the accident. I assume that she's taking this deal, but because of how it gets cut off before she's quite signed, I'm wondering if there isn't going to be some sort of, change of plans, or if Al's going to find a new way to use her, or I don't know. I'd be very interested though. Because as much as Miss Isringhausen is a sly boots, and as much as she is like here for completely, what's the word? Nefarious I guess nefarious is fair, but it feels a little bit too sinister. Like, I think the people who hired her do genuinely think Alma killed her husband. So I don't think it's like they're just trying to frame her, unless it's Alma's dad, which was my first theory. And if it's him, he knows perfectly well that she didn't, in which case, fuck this whole thing. And I will use the word nefarious in that case. But if it's her husband's family, her late husband's family, and they really believe it, I won't say that so strongly. But as much as she represents, something that's sort of double dealing, I kind of like her being as like icy as she is and as practical as she is. And I would like to see if Al could like somehow team up with her. I don't know that he could because she's so smart. I feel like there's no manipulating her, but who knows? We also, I have to note, have not seen Silas in like 2 episodes. And I really do wonder what's going on with him because I kind of feel like she like slit his throat and left him in a ditch somewhere. I don't see why she would, but it just worries me to not see him and for her to be still walking around fine. Okay, so back to the episode. I'm trying to make sure that I cover everything while also going wildly out of order. Okay, so Cy Tolliver. Let's talk about what's going on. There's a couple things. Plot points real quick. Cy is dealing with that fucking dude who killed his brother. I can't remember this dude's name, and I'll find it in a second. But this dude, where is he? Let's see. We've got Tess, Charlotte, Mose, right? Mose. Mose apparently just wants to look at piles of money while he fucks a whore, and I cannot get over how basic that is. Like, he is a basic bitch. That is some shit. That's like, guy, get a life. Jesus. And I'm so happy that Mose is dead. I'm just going to fast forward real quick. I hate him so much. He is a combination of so many terrible things. First, he killed his brother with hardly any provocation. He just wanted a lot of money, and that was plenty, and he just did it, which I have no respect for somebody who doesn't even seem to like hem and haw about this decision. Secondly, he is incredibly, it's sort of like arrogance, but it's bravado, because I don't even think that he is really this arrogant. I think it's mostly a show for the benefit of everybody else. And he puts it forth so harshly, and so it's so pathetic in its way. And the cowardice as well of like clearly being like going to Francis and being so concerned about whether he's going to be found out and whether anybody's going to accuse him, that seems to reek of like conscience, but he can't even admit to himself that it's his conscience and is just trying to act like. There's just so much about this guy that I do not respect, that I do not like. And the way, of course, that he talks to Seth and Charlie when they come in and talk to him and demand to know, like, what the fuck happened? You're trying to tell us your brother just happened to kill himself by accident the day that you sold out your claims. He is so gross to them. Don't act fucking entitled to answers. You know what, dude? Don't act fucking entitled to piles of money while you fuck somebody either, but whatever. And Cy is trying to deal with him because of the fact that this dude is sort of important to what Francis Wolcott's got going on. But Francis, I think Francis hates Cy Tolliver, which is super weird because Francis killed 3 women with almost no provocation at all. And it's like, even so, he looks down on the brand of cruel that Cy is. And it's a weird, like, it's completely human. I'm not mad at the writing for this at all. It's almost beautiful in how true it feels that there are going to be people who are horrible criminals that look down on the type of crime that other people commit. And he just seems to be, it's like, I don't think it's just like, I think it's a combination of what Cy does and just his personality. I think Francis just doesn't like this guy. and doesn't like having to work with him. And this moment where Mose declares that he's being cheated and demands his money back and pulls his gun and demands not only his money back, it sounds like he's starting to say, I want all the money back. But then he pushes it in a way that makes me feel like, is he just trying to rob the place? The way that Francis handles this, obviously, Francis does not think much of Mose either. He does not respect this dude one single tiny bit. But also, this guy is here threatening to fuck up Cy's day and his place. And you get the vibe that Francis is like really like here for that and is willing to push this guy the way that he does, more because of the fact that this guy is in Cy's place when this all goes down. I don't feel like Francis would have been willing to push the dude's buttons the way that he is if they had just been standing out on the street. I think this is a 1-2 punch that he gets to get this fucking dude who is a huge pain in the ass out from underfoot. And he gets to put Cy out. There's a body, broken glass. They're going to have to just cope with this whole fucking thing. I feel like Francis is just enjoying that for the sake of it. And I can't help but wonder how his partnership with Cy is going to continue, because if he wants to work with somebody, I was going to say the competent person. That's not fair. Cy is competent, but none of the people working for Cy are particularly competent, and they don't work for him because they like him or feel loyalty to him. They work for him because they're afraid of him and they're greedy or they're addicts, and that he gives them something that they need. Al has a whole other thing going on, which in theory, I think aligns a lot better with Francis. However, their interests are directly opposed to one another. And I don't see, if Francis doesn't want to work with Cy anymore, how he gets out of this. Like, I guess he doesn't need to work with Cy, strictly speaking, anymore, because like they've got almost every claim, right? Like they really cleaned up. So I guess he could sort of just like leave Cy swinging, and there's not a whole lot that Cy could really do or claim. I mean, Cy didn't do a whole lot to help. But yeah, the whole way that this like is handled and the way that Francis talks to him afterwards, like I'm going to find the exact spot real quick so that I can read exactly what it is that Francis says. Cause I just like, I really loved how this whole scene was staged and all of the different people that are pointing guns at Mose at the time. And it really feels clear that Mose sort of like, he wants to die, I think, a little bit, but he's too weak to even admit to that. Like but he goes down and he's not even completely dead. And Francis countermands Cy. Cy says something about how, first of all, I could have cooled this out. Why did you have to instigate like this? To which Francis says, on my order, Mr. Tolliver, Lee will burn this building, mutilating you before, during, or after as I specify, or choosing to forestall as I forbid. So right there. And then a second later, because Cy has said somebody get the doc, he says, tell Sheriff Bullock what transpired here before getting the doc. And is putting Cy in a position of having to deal with that rather than like just getting to cover it up and act like it never happened. And I just really feel like that was Francis sort of washing his hands of Cy. Or at least making it clear to Cy, we're not fucking partners. I think you are under the misconception that we're in this together, and we're not. You are basically my employee, and you are just as disposable as anybody else, and I'm not going to fucking sit here and take orders or insults from you, or act like I need to respect your bullshit establishment when I have my own shit to deal with and my own fish to fry. Which, I mean, I hate the fact that I'm sort of beginning to like Francis, but I hate Cy so much. And I've hated him for so much longer, so that hate really has like put down roots, that Francis coming up against him, especially when I know that Francis is totally capable of like holding his own against Cy, I can't help but sort of cheer Francis on. This is like Umbridge versus Snape, where as much as I hate Snape, I want him to triumph over Umbridge, because I just hate her so much. God. So yeah, I'll be really interested to see how all of that goes. Okay, so covered those. Oh, let's talk about, all right, real quick, I'll talk about Merrick. Because Merrick basically is like totally on a high at the beginning of this episode, because he put a bunch of the bullshit that Al sort of put in his head into the paper. And he thinks that he did really well. And he thinks that people are going to be really interested in what the paper has to say, and publishes like extra copies and yada, yada, yada. And is really taken off guard when Al basically yells at him. And Merrick, I have to say, is really holding his own with Al in a way that I 100% did not expect. Like, he comes in there and Al bites his head off, and Merrick doesn't cower. He just stares at him like, what the fuck? And then follows him upstairs and is like, you better not set foot in that office. Ordering Al around in a way that people just don't do in this show. And I loved it. Like, also, you see them standing next to each other, and Merrick is like 1.5 feet taller than Al, which I don't think I ever realized before, but damn. And he's just really not going to be ordered around by this guy like the way that other people are. And Al seems to recognize that, and it's like, all right, this is a guy that has to be dealt with cerebrally, right? So Al takes him into his office and explains to him, and it's just like, look, dude, everything that you wrote in that paper, I believe, is actually a genuine possibility for this camp. I'm not faulting you for what you put together, but you put it all in one paper, and there is no way people reading this aren't going to smell a rat. Everything in one shot, forcing all of their opinions in one direction. It seems really obvious. And if you want to do this effectively, you need to be a lot fucking subtler with everything. And Merrick, who had been really like building up a head of steam, immediately sees Al's point and is like, yeah, you're right. Okay, I get it. And then they move on to like drinking, at which point Merrick starts swearing, which does not sit well on him at all. I do not care for that. And I love the stink of ink on my hands. Give that a whiff. He's saying Al, and I'm just like, dude, you need to calm down. But I did enjoy that scene, so I wanted to mention that. All right, let's talk about what's going on with Jane and Joni, because to be honest, I am mad at myself. When I was talking like a couple episodes ago about how bummed I was that Joni didn't have to seem to have any allies, anybody watching her back specifically, it never even occurred to me about Jane, which it kind of should have, because Joni and Charlie's paths had crossed a couple of times. So there's that vague tie there, but it just didn't really it never clicked. And you see them together now, and it's like so obvious. And I have to be honest, I'm like in the beginning stages of shipping the two of them. I think Joni's gay, if not bi. I think she might be gay and just willing to put up with men because that's her business. But I don't know about Jane. And I could see the two of them like weirdly being a power couple in a strange way. And I know that's not something that the camp would accept, but women living together in a brothel situation is like one of the few times that would be completely treated as like par for the course. And I would love it if Jane would get like genuinely involved in what's going on with Joni. Now, Joni, when Jane says something about like, I guess you're going to restock and reopen, and Joni says, you would think so, wouldn't you? It sounds like she doesn't intend to do that necessarily. And I don't really know what to say about that because what is she going to do with the space then otherwise, you know? Maybe Jane could come up with a couple of ideas about that. Maybe she could open a hotel, you know, and compete against fucking EB. But yeah, I just really love the dynamic between the two of them and how Joni is in a lot of ways just as scrappy and just as like strong as Jane. But Jane has the weakness of her alcoholism that's practically killing her in front of our eyes. And she hasn't got roots anywhere or attachment to anyone. And it would be really nice if her friendship with Joni gave her something to hold on to, because it seems like ever since Bill died, she's just basically been drinking herself to death. Like she doesn't seem to feel like she has anything to live for anymore. So if Joni could be that, that would be great. I would really like to see Jane stick around because she's hilarious and just a good-hearted person as much as she is prickly and gets offended in ways that I didn't even think of. So yeah, the two of them together on screen, it's just so good, you know? And I love that she's like sitting outside with her gun, waiting to fuck with anybody who tries to come in the door. And I love that, like, the look that she has with all of her, you know, fringe and skins and everything is such a like complete opposite of what's going on with Joni. It's just everything about the pairing of the two of them is really, really fun to me. So yeah, I'm just hopeful about that and just going to sort of watch that space. And I feel like her conversation, Jane's with Charlie later on, it's just sort of like, it's frustrating, but also sort of sweet to see the dance that they go through where they're each so like irritated with the other, but honestly, obviously care, and how they express it in the best way that they even know how. And Charlie decides like Charlie has like another run-in with Francis when, I'm trying to remember exactly what sets him off here, because they're talking to Mose. And, when Mose says something, it sort of like spurs Francis from the corner. Oh, that's right. Francis informs Seth about how a Cornishman was killed because he was stealing. And that is what seems to like, for Charlie, just be like, really? He was just stealing and you fucking murdered him. And that's what spurs the title Amalgamation and Capital. Basically, what he's trying to say is money rules the world and you're part of this, and that's bullshit. But he's saying words that we find out later he doesn't even completely understand. And I mean, we all know that I think Charlie is a cinnamon roll to begin with. But Charlie being as like tolerant of the Sioux religious practices and as well informed about that as he is, and also being basically what it sounds like is sort of anti-capitalist. I am here for it. And again, I would like to put forth my name as potential wife to Charlie Utter. What's up? Because yeah, all of that, dude. And the way that he just like lays into Francis and gets so irritated, and he tells Cy to like stay out of it, and Cy is like, hi, this is my place you're sitting in, and you're not going to fucking talk to me like that. Charlie has just got some balls on him when the times arise. And I just love it. I love these moments where he really gets to like stand up for something and not be afraid at all. So yeah, this scene culminates in Seth picking him up and carrying him outside to get him to calm down. And Charlie tells him about the letter and how disgusted he is that this was a private letter written by his best friend to his wife. And somehow this fucking nobody sails into camp and gets his hands on it. How? Just because he had the money, and who knows who he bought it from, and how Charlie is going to go and deliver it to this man's fucking widow after like a bunch of strangers have pawed over it and read it already, and how sick it makes him. And he's not wrong at all. But yeah, it turns out in the end that he has decided he is not going to tell Jane where he's going. And I really kind of get it. Like, she is so tempestuous and sort of weirdly unpredictable in the way she's going to react to stuff. I wouldn't want to like push that either. There's no need for her to know about it. All she's going to do is flip out, try and attack Francis and figure out where he got it from. Francis is going to do God knows what in response. And if she does find out that it was EB, then she's going to go off to him. Like, it's just going to set off a chain reaction of her just getting really aggressive over something it's too late. It can't be changed at this point, you know? So yeah, I feel like I've covered pretty much everything except for, the general and what's his face, the long name that I always forget, trying to geld this stallion. And that's what leads to this whole thing, because the general wants to sell it to the army and they'll take it for $100, but they like it if the horses are gelded first. And that sets everything at the end off. And I feel like the only other very small thing that I did want to mention that I liked was when Martha and her son bring the lunch to the hardware store. And they're all eating. She looks up at Trixie and says, "Won't you join us?" In a really like, "Hey, I know you feel like you're not one of us, but I want you to know you are totally welcome to come and sit and eat with us, and it's fine." And I liked that. It seemed like a very purposeful, like extending a hand. And I think Trixie was a little bit touched by that also. You could see in her face that she was like, "Hey, cool. All right. Thank you. You're not going to be like, you know, treating me like I have some sort of fucking contagious disease." And she says, like, "I don't usually eat midday meal," and I believe her. I think that that's why. But, you know, there's still that moment of just sort of like, ooh, what's going to happen here with the two of them? And I love that Martha's really making an effort to include everybody, you know? So I really like this episode until the end, and it's so sad, and I hate everything about how it ended, and I'm really worried about it. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, but thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again to Patrick for commissioning this episode. And I am just, this show has got me hooked. So, thank you all. And I will be seeing you soon with a new episode.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.